Day Moors, and welcome to the House Awakening Minds and our Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey, who will be lecturing tonight. Let's receive him.
Take notes. We're going to deal with the specificity of definitions. What we wanted to do earlier, actually because I was cutting tiles, so we didn't get a chance to go to the store, I wanted to get some buckets and use like a demonstration I used for the children in Kentucky a few years ago. And I was going to put like 4 containers with words and words under them, and then present to you the definitions, but not the word. And then you will participate and say what the word is. Now, the reason for the exercise of specificity of definitions is to show you the damage that has been done with connotative linguistics, and also part of the mind control system that they've been using to make our people illiterate, what you call educated illiteracy. And a lot of times when you state it, people, don't take it serious because they think, our mind, we can read for years, type thing. But when it comes to serious activity and response to the Roman operations in the Western Hemisphere and the world, it is important that you actually know what words actually mean, distinguished from what you assume that they mean. Because when you study us and our communities, we're damaged more than anyone else in relationship to European operations on the land. And so that's another reason why I wanted to present that exercise. So we'll abridge it slightly, but we'll still do that exercise. All right? Now, what I also wanted to share with you is chapter 8 from the Council of the Seven of the World. And I would please for all of us to read it together in unison. And this is one of the most important chapters of script for the Aquarian Age, for you coming out of darkness into marvelous light. So I wanted to share it last week, but I didn't have it last week, so I just put it up this week. So we will all read this together. And keep in mind, we're going to print these out to make sure that you have a copy of this too, because it's a very important both history and philosophical presentment to protect you from the corruption of the priesthood. All right, Islamos. Let's read this together. The Mysteries of the Silent Brotherhood of the East, chapter 8. The Council of the Seven of the World. In every age since time began, but 7 sages lived. At first of every age, these sages meet to note the course of nations, peoples, and tongues, to note how far toward justice and love the race has gone, to formulate the code of law, religious postulates, and plans of rule best suited for the coming age. An age had passed, and lo, another age had come. The sages must convene. Now Alexandria was the center of the world's best thought, and here in Philo's home the sages met. From China came Menster, from India Vidyapati came, from Persia Castor came, and from Assyria Ashpenaz came, from Greece Apollo came. Matheno was the Egyptian sage, and Philo was the chief of Hebrew thought. The time was due, the council met and sat 7 days. And Menster rose and said, the wheel of time has turned once more. The race is on a higher plane of thought. The garments that our fathers wore have given out. The cherubim have woven a celestial cloth, have placed it in our hands, and we must make for men new garbs. The sons of men are looking up for greater light. No longer do they care for gods hewn out of wood. They seek for Allah not made with hands. They see the beams of the coming days, and yet comprehend them not. The time is ripe, and we must fashion well these garments for the race. And let us make for men new garments of justice, mercy, and love, that they may hide their nakedness when shines the light of the coming days. And Wigwam Party said, our priests have all gone mad. They saw a demon in the wilds, and at them cast their lamps, and they are broken up, and not a gleam of light has any priest for men. The night is dark, the heart of India calls for light. The priesthood cannot be reformed, it is already dead. Its greatest needs are graves and funeral chants. The new age calls for liberty, the kind that makes each man a priest, enables him to go alone and lay his offerings on the shrine of Allah. And Casper said, in Persia, people walk in fear. They do the good for fear to do the wrong. The devil is the greatest power in our land, and though a myth, he gambles on his knees, both youth and age. Our land is dark, and evil prospers in the dark. Fear rides on every passing breeze and lurks on every form of life, The fear of evil is a myth. It is an illusion and a snare, but it will live until some mighty power shall come to raise the ethers to the plane of light. When this shall come to pass, the Magian land will glory in the light. The soul of Persia calls for light. This is one of the scripts that the priesthood all over the world don't want the masses to see. That's why we share it with you, to remind you why the world is in darkness. Not just because the people lack knowledge, but the priesthood have actually been parasites on the backs of the people and actually been working with Rome to steal the people's birthright and getting a benefit and pretending to share spiritual knowledge and history and philosophy with the masses when actually they've been operating for their selfish selves under the secret treaty of Verona for all these centuries. And the world has gone dark. People have gotten poorer and poorer. Miseries have gotten deeper, etc. And so this is why I share this chapter, to remind people not to be deceived by the priesthood. Now keep this in mind, in relationship to this, when you all read Septuaginta, and where Yahshua says, first there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It is very important for our people to understand that that statement carries in culture from time immemorial, and as long as humanity operates and communicates, that principle stands. It is unmoving, it is a maxim. And with that maxim, it is very important for us to have a clear understanding of meanings of words. And whereas, and in many instances, people don't have necessarily a knowledge of the etymon of words, the fundamental rule of etymon and etymology gives you the tools by which you can research yourself and then learn to know, which means you don't need to know immediately. Those are the tools by which you come to know. And so you would use those basic tools of etymology, basic, we're talking about elementary, degree, to liberate yourself from the darkness created by the priesthood and the Romans in partnership while pretending that they were separate. It's very important because particularly as we move into the Aquarian light, the Romans are accelerating their corruption on the planet and around the world, particularly in North America, because they're being unseated. And so they're trying the best they can to destroy people's lives politically and economically as quickly as they can, and also physically with their biological warfare, chemtrails, GMOs, etc., and the pharmaceuticals. That's aside from their direct hot fire war machines. But on the other hand, too, the very nature of us rejecting Rome, the strength of that energy, the sincerity with which and how we operate with our thought energy in rejecting Rome's falsehood and criminality and frauds and misrepresentations and misprisions, etc. This is where we appeal to the spirit of light, the spirit of our ancient mothers and fathers, and the spirit of all that is divine to come to your aid with sincerity. Sincerity is the key, actually. Because keep in mind, the divine law is that nature does not recognize personal station. She operates on merit and merit alone. This is why sincerity is key. And it's again why we're dealing with specificity of definitions. For those of you who have your dictionaries with you, don't hesitate to use them. We're basically going to deal with, say, your college dictionaries, etc., or your basic, unabridged dictionaries that have basic etymology in it. So we're going to present some words, and we're going to ask you to participate and present definitions, timeline, etc. All right. Movement. Let's go divine. Right? National. Movement. All right. And that's for starters. We got a dictionary up there, too. Yeah. Right, yeah, to the left. Yeah. There's one to the left. Anybody grab that? The red one? All right. And someone share the mic. Now, basically, what I would have done, by the time, I do apologize for that, but this interchange and participation will help also. I would have taken the definitions and put them in the container. And the word would be on the bottom of the container, but not with the definition. You read the definition, and then you present the word that goes with it. All right? And in doing so, what you will recognize immediately that people's concepts about a lot of things are incorrect. Now, when you look into Septuaginta, and it talks about the clearing of people's minds, the purging of people's minds from corruption, it makes the philosophical statement of separating the wheat from the chaff. Separating the wheat from the chaff, translated into the word, is separating the connotative presentments from denotation. Are we clear? Separating the connotative presentments from denotative meanings. Yet connotative presentments are presented to the masses as meanings right along with the denotation. That's one of the keys on how they miseducate people. Are we clear? Is there anybody who understand what I just said? Everybody clear on that? All right. So you want to distinguish the connotation connotations, right, versus denotation. Now that's as a rule, and that you can say that's separating wheat in a way, from a philosophical point, from the chaff. Right? Now, look, as an example, go into connotations. Give me connotations, sis, and give her the mic. Hold it for a while she's doing her work, please. And use this exercise for yourself, too, because it's a good method for studying. And I've always shared this with my children because it'll help them. Because keep in mind, in the school systems run by the corporate entity operators, they will not refine that argument because they are part of the problem for miseducating the people, the children. So they're not going to make that argument. Connotation.
You want the first one or the last one? The act or process of
Now, this is what you would do. Now, again, this is why we're going through the exercise. All right? So the first thing you would do is give it a part of speech, which would be right after the word.
Noun.
See, she's not in the mic. You don't have her in the mic.
Noun.
All right, so connotation is a noun, right?
Yes.
So these are rules, right?
Yes.
The first thing that you do is put it in its proper part of speech, right? Let's go in general, everyone. How many parts of speech?
8.
Say it again.
8. Sometimes 9.
Keep it going. All right, 8 parts of speech, right? Now keep this in mind, so we're going to set the rules, because these are basic grammar rules, so that we can deal with specificity of definitions. It's a noun. Now sometimes the word may be classified in 2 categories, sometimes, all right? And so you would pay attention to its context to see how it is used, all right?
Indeed.
But the issue is to separate the connotation from the denotation. All right, sis. And then also make sure that while you're reading, give us the etymon. That's the brackets. When you see the brackets. Go ahead.
The act or process of connoting, the configuration of suggestive or associative implications constituting the general sense of an abstract expression beyond its literal, explicit sense. Compare denotation.
All right, so it's an abstract, right? And not necessarily always the thing, is it? All right, so one of the things that we want to be aware of is sometimes they'll use a connotative presentment as a meaning when they're giving you a law document or legal document when they're trying to rob you. Or they're trying to steal your property with a foreclosure. Or they're trying to breach your inheritance that you should have gotten from your mother and steal it for the state corporate operators. They will present certain presentments in a connotative semantic angle, meaning one thing and not the other. And if you accept the connotative presentment as the absolute true meaning, they can deceive you, and they often do. And they do that to our people because they know our people violate this rule that we're discussing right now, specificity of definitions. And the specificity of definitions is the consciousness of separating the denotation, which would be the etymon, which would be harmonic with the etymon, from the connotation for the purpose of critical thinking, all right? So that's why we're doing the exercise. Are we clear? All right. Now, give the definitions, and then you separate the denotation from the connotation and show us the etymology.
Number 3 is logic. The total of the attributes constituting the meaning of a term. Intention. Connotative, adjective. Connotativity is adverb. Connote. To suggest or imply an addition to literal meaning.
Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily specific, is it? Now, what is the etymon? What is the brackets?
Medieval in Latin, connotere, to mark in addition.
So, now, it's medieval, Latin, and then what you would do, and so that we don't drag it out and you don't get bored, you'd write that down and then you look that up and you put a timeline on it. So write that down. This is an exercise. You'd write that down. Now, if it was Middle English or Germanic, etc., you would do the same thing, and then you put the timeline on it, which would be a numerical estimated date of its practice usage in the language, and as it transfers or mutates from one language to another. Are we clear? Clear. And the reason you do that is because in societies where they're maintaining peonage, that people refer to as slavery, as connotation, that, you know, in that manner, they would present things what you call out of sequence of time. As an example, a practice here is common in North America for transferring or converting people's estates to back the private foreign corporation style as United States, private debt for its owners on people who are not part of that order. Are we clear? And particularly people of Canaanite Moabite descent who are commonly known under connotative brand systems as Negroes, Blacks, Coloreds, West Indians, etc. Are we clear? So if they called you Black or Negro, you would not suspect that it had any negative intent if you didn't understand social engineering. Because you hear people throw those words around commonly, right? And you hear other people not contesting that. Is that correct? All right, now go into that same dictionary and look up the word black. And they'll relate it to a people as if it's a pedigree and an identity, which would be a connotative presentment. Are we clear? Including writing books, and in those books, taking the brand system that was set up by the German Dutch masters, mostly those from the Dutch East Pacific Company, right? For the purpose of converting their estates. This is what you call land theft or land grabs. When you hear the Europeans refer to, particularly from the associates to the Wigwam Party, and after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, where it became popular for the European foreigners and aliens operating in the Western Hemisphere to start calling themselves white and start calling the Aboriginal people of the land blacks and Indians. It has a social purpose. It has a functional legal consequence. But when people aren't aware of it, they don't suspect it and they don't rebut it or challenge it and then suffer the consequence. It's another reason why we're doing this exercise in specificity of definitions. Now read black, please.
Being of the darkest achromatic.
No, you never go past the part of speech. Make sure that you. Adjective. All right, so you make sure that you don't do that to the children. Because remember in school, they're going to teach the child that black is a noun. It's the identity of a people. Do you see the connotative application already without going any further? Not because I say so. Do you recognize it? It's important that you recognize it. Are we clear? All right, so it's an adjective. An adjective describes and it modifies. Does it identify? Does it identify? Question, does it identify?
No.
Why? If it was an identity, what classification would it be? Give him the mic. You moving the mic back and forth over here. It's important that you be clear because it's important that you teach the children. Because remember, one of the missionary works that we're doing purposely is clearing things up for the next generation. So they're not subject to the Christian black codes that we've been suffering. And that we're suffering even presently. And many people don't know they're suffering it. Because they've been trained to call it racism, which again is incompetence because it's not what's going on. Are we clear? Now, what is its etymology? Look in the brackets.
There are no brackets. Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
I don't know what you're saying. You speak Chinese?
I'm trying to hold it without obstructing the view.
There are no brackets. It doesn't have anything in brackets.
All right.
There are a bunch of definitions, though. There are at least 14 definitions.
Sometimes the etymology is at the end of all the presentments and not
You
the
find
beginning.
it? Look at the brackets.
Middle English.
All right, so if it's Middle English, now we're dealing with the timeline. What's the timeline, Middle English?
1100 to 1500.
1728 to 1799. That's what it says.
You're working it too. What's it say, sis?
I'm sorry.
Timeline.
It says 1728 to 1799 in here.
No, Middle English.
Old English, that's all it says.
All right, so holding now. Middle English is 1100 to 15, right? Right? And so that would be Middle English. As an example. Now, how many people claim to be scholars and in the name of scholarship who are controlling the education for our children will tell our people that's ancient Black Africa and write books and say ancient black gods and black pharaohs and black Jesuses and stuff like that? What does a scholar or person who has the capacity to read recognize immediately that that person is lying? A person who can't read, who don't know this rule, will usually absorb the presentment, which is really not the meaning. From that point on, that person who projected it controls the narrative and now controls your mind. And all they have to do, because they built a false foundation, all they have to do is what they refer to in social engineering as controlling the narrative. And once they set that foundation and it goes uncontested on the principle of not truth, but the principle of the strength of affidavit and unrebutted, it becomes the political reality, though not the truth. The person who accepts that later on along the path, if they're dealing in any contract law or laws of inheritance or estates, they can be and usually are cheated, which is why that practice was instituted in the first place. It was not an accidental presentment. That's what I'm presenting to you. Are we clear?
Clear.
Another scholar, say of your own, who have been taught by Romans, who work for Romans, would promote this because they would get a secondary benefit. And they will usually have a system. The system that they use currently is called a 501c3 Skull and Bones Agreement, set up by Lyndon Baines Johnson with their Negro leader guys who are appointed. They're not elected by the people, and they don't really, even though people think they do, work for the people. They work for Rome. This is why the negative amongst us continues. Now, a person who can read can see through them and see through their works by the words they present. A person who can't thinks that they're supporting them because they're saying things like, oh, they're racist, we need jobs, let us pray, and things like that. You know, and it sounds really innocent and they think it's spiritual. And a person who can read and knows history and sociology knows that person's an operative. This is why it's so difficult for really rescuing our people in certain communities, because they cannot read. They do not know the rules of basic separation of the connotative presentments. And very often they'll say connotative meanings. No, connotative presentments as meanings, distinguished from definition, which is meaning, which is the etymon. So you look at the etymon and the denotation as harmonious, as supportive. Connotation is accepted in linguistics, usually when one takes liberty or one's doing an expression. But when it comes to refined thought, always be careful, because the connotation may be interjected for purposes untoward, not necessarily in your best interest. But it does not mean you don't use connotative linguistics. You don't use it without qualification, particularly when you're dealing with something specific of rescuing people. All right? Or as an example, say when the Pope of Rome appointed 72 scholars to address the Book of the Dead and Septuaginta to develop the Bible for mind control for the masses. Are we clear? People who don't know that history would take the Bible on its face value without consideration of its anthropomorphic presentment, without a knowledge of its derivative origins, and fall victim to mind control set up by Rome. Not that the book itself is wrong, the book is misrepresented. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Now, if you notice as an example, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, but almost everywhere on the planet Earth where the Europeans have gone and taken the Bible, they've given the people the Bible and taken the land.
That's right. That's right. True.
And the miseries that the people later incur, they themselves, through that training, start attributing it to the mystical devil. Did it to them. Are we clear?
Clear.
And so they don't suspect that the priesthood are parasites, because they usually say words like Allah and Jesus and Muhammad. You get the point? And people get teary-eyed and they start giving their lunch money. No, they do, because they think that the presentments are for equal spirituality. So the issue is what they think is divine and spiritual in instruction. You ask the average person, and they will call that collectively spirituality. However, it's not necessarily true. So what I want you to look up is divine law. Look up divine, and you present that. You can do it, or you can share it with your neighbor, let her do it, and what we're going to bounce around and let you all participate, because I want you to take on a frame of thought with this exercise and then adopt this discipline for yourselves, even though it is a general practice that we present to you. And you all know when Brother Abdullah does a class, he will refine the argument for you. What I'm doing is dealing specificity and keeping it simple so that you can apply in your everyday life. Because this is like third grade grammar that I'm talking at this moment. All right? However, what you discover when you talk to our people, it is a rule that our people, even as adults, do not use. And a lot of times when we're talking here, and Dr. Naila's, phone's been blowing up all week, and she can't get rest because she's phone secretary by default. She's probably in there dozing off sleeping because they be wearing her out, boy. But and the real deal of it is, on the political realm, because the Romans are accelerating their ongoing activity of hypothecating people's estates, because they're under pressure, because the world governments systematically, even though there's resistance and it's bouncing back and forth, are no longer accepting their private commercial T-bonds that they set up since the Civil War on the backs of our people who they called Negro, Black, and Colored in West India. And that has been backing their debt since the commercial mercenary war. So write that down so that you can keep this clear in your mind. Commercial mercenary war, presented to you in history books as the Civil War. Are we clear? Clear. And the reason I'm saying this is because these things are being brought up today in the forums of parliaments around the world. And it concerns you here particularly, although it concerns other nation states too. But what you recognize is our people have a tendency to be least cognizant of what's going on in real politics on the planet. You know, like we've been minimized on so many levels that we think that we're out of the loop and think that certain things that take place in the political forum has nothing to do with us when it has everything to do with you. Are we clear?
Clear.
And because for these last few years, we've been dealing with refined arguments and information sharing with you on things that concern these matters, it has come to the attention of people in government around the world, and particularly with the Europeans operating in North America, United States Corporation Company. And so they've unleashed trolls to counter everything that we're doing. It's because when you become knowledgeable of what the real politics are, you start dismantling the system without moving, just by the projections of your mind. They don't want you to know that, neither do your most of your leader guys, imams, rabbis, reverends, the whole crew. Because all of them, with all due respect, have been guilty of participating in maintaining Rome's mind control systems over you, while hiding behind religion and not really teaching religion. Are we clear?
Yes.
Teaching secularism in the name of religion. So that's part of the mind control. As an example, let me give you an example. And this is true. And I don't want to say a falsehood, so I'll go under the estimate, all right? There's about over 50,000 versions of Christianity presented to the masses for mind control purposes. There's about 77 versions of Islam. When Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, informed the people that there should be no secularism in Islam. Islam is really a science of life. But when you look at the conditions of the world, masses of the world are caught within the web of these secularisms. And instead of actually developing culturally and with love, they're actually hating, murdering, and doing every foul thing in the name of Allah and in the name of Jesus on the planet Earth. They hide behind religion. The masses don't get religion. When you say that, a lot of people get sensitive because they think you're attacking them, but you're not attacking them, you're trying to liberate them. And so we're sharing with you again the specificity of definitions so that you can start liberating yourselves. Also, because of the nature of the venues that we address here at the House of Reawakening Minds, and for those of you who come into the Philadelphia territory at the York House at 5325 Old York Road on Saturdays, you know that we deal with things to remedy our people that some people consider controversial. They won't call us liars. They'll say, you shouldn't be saying that. Who gave you the authority to tell the truth? You know, no, really, they really do. What you find is when you start educating the masses, what occurs is you don't have to attack people who are less than honest or who control institutions that got their hand in your pocket. What it does, it overthrows institutions that aren't honest. And to tell you the truth, 90% of all institutions are not honest and not even necessary. They're duplicitous, and most of them are based on extortion by using guilt, fear, superstition. Very little remedy, no recourse, and artful complaining about the miseries of humanity. The art of complaining. You know, really, brother, he's got the white book. He's racist. He said it really good. Really racist. Oh, boy, that brother said that, man. You know, this is what we're into. It fixes nothing, solves nothing. Meanwhile, IRS trying to take his account. They steal his grandmother's house that he should get inherited. And the owners of the corporate franchise states, in the name of sovereign power, taxing him out of it. And these are the things that are really the injuries, and why the priesthood keep you preoccupied with belief systems while you get raped and they split the spoils with the state. I want to remind you all that in the Western Hemisphere, the major source of the wealth of the church came from the priesthood and bishopric declaring women who had any knowledge witches, torturing them, stealing their estate, and the majority would go to the bishopric, and splits would go to people like Torquemada, Thomas de Torquemada. That whole operations of the Inquisition now becomes the IRS. And this is again why people's concepts must be corrected, specificity of meanings, specificity of definitions. And as you already know, the priesthood has the whole world under mysticism. There's another reason why I wanted to read this. You know, if you don't give me $5 so I can split with Jesus and stuff, and make sure I make charity, you know, with the masjid, etc. Well, God said he did. The roof was leaking. You know, guilt trip. Can you read hell from the law book? Elijah? From Black's Law Dictionary. Now, most of you know, and I don't have to really emphasize this with you, that most of our people are scooped up with this word hell. Fear that they're going to hell if they don't give Reverend Jones $5 for Jesus and $5 for him. Maybe 10. But, you know, to give you an envelope, make sure it's 50. They even put ATMs in them places there. But love money is the root of all evil, right? But see, they can purify it. Because they got God's cell phone, they got direct connection with a personal relationship. And this is they play on people's guilt, fear, superstition, and they've been raping the masses. And very few people have been challenging them. Now you see the story of Yahushua challenging the priesthood, and you know that's why the priesthood got rid of him. You know, stealing widow's pennies. You know, and then said the devil did it, because the priesthood did it. And guess how many adults, even after reading the books, Septuaginta, Latin or Hebrew, Torah, Pentateuch, Hexateuch, Bibles, and will say that the devil, Jesus was doing good stuff and everything, freeing the people and stuff, and then here comes the devil and stuff, because they're doing all this good praying and stuff. Jesus minding his own business and stuff. And then the devil came and stuff. No, it was the priesthood. The priesthood. A child can even see it in the book, but you know how many adults follow that party line of raising money to kick the devil's ass? We're messing with Jesus. And nobody pays attention to the priesthood, who is really working with Rome. And them same priests, to this very day, promote to the masses that there's a separation of church and state, and they've never been separate. The church belongs to the state and the state belongs to the church. Do you understand? Go ahead, interject.
Page 857 of Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, all right?
Yes.
Hell, the name formerly given to a place under the exchequer chamber where the king's debtors were confined.
Say it again. Say it very clear.
The name formerly given to a place under the exchequer chamber where the king's debtors were confined.
Now, so you see why they start teaching the adults in the mentality anthropomorphic of children and saying that hell beneath the ground and hot place, because that's what it usually was: hot, sweaty, and dirty. And anyone that didn't pay the 10% Roman tax, which is called a tithe, were thrown into a hole underneath the church, the exchequer's chambers. And that was hell. Now, as the priesthood have deceived the world, now they think that hell's a place to go. And the Bible, the Quran, the Waspi, and the holy books, for those who violate divine laws, so to speak, they're going to be cast in hell, and that's their concepts. Are we clear? There's no reason I'll read this chapter to you, and I want you to remind yourself of this chapter. Because if you are, with all due respect, and it's not personal, to be liberated, the priesthood must be taken off your back. No one can do it. You must do it, and you must do it willingly. I'm not talking against them. I'm just talking of what they do and who they really are. You can do with it what you please to. However, we have given you and will give you enough information and enough reference that you yourself should know by now, after these many generations, that they cure nothing, that they're actually parasites.
Islam.
You know, and this is another reason why even a lot of people who have this knowledge don't want the masses to have the Book of the East, if you get the point. And remember, your fundamentals of all your religious world, of all the philosophies, come from the East. But yet they will do derivative operations and then deny the East, or condemn the East if it's wrong, and they've gotten their knowledge from the East. Are we clear? Just a reminder to you. And keep in mind that the priesthood have all the books. Like say, for instance, in a private conversation, if I'm talking to a rabbi, claim to be a Jew, he'll talk that stuff to the public, but if I'm talking to him, I tell him, there ain't no damn such thing as Jew, and that's a degree. It's Yahudi, and probably you ain't a Jew, so don't even come that with you don't come that with me. You do that with somebody that don't know scholarship. And in private, you won't debate because you don't tell the truth. In public, cast thee out of the devils and shit. Right. You start that stuff. Killeth him. They start that stuff. And the masses come to you, we run down the street. The believers trying to kill you because they think you're against Allah and Jesus. And all they do. And you just threw them a life raft. This is, again, why this lesson, specificity of definitions. Because some of the things that we critique and present to you in critical thinking, we don't want you to think that we're attacking any organized group or any organized people or anybody's belief. We want you to know whatever you do, whatever you claim, know what you're claiming and know what you're doing. Make an intelligent decision in what you do. And in truth, true religion does not teach belief systems. True religion teaches knowledge. Are we clear? True religion does not promote belief systems. Dogmatism and dogmata systems promote belief systems. Are we clear? And I know you've heard me say this many times, and I mean it sincerely. The masses don't get religion, the masses get dogma. The priesthood keeps religion for themselves. And for their protection, their greed, and their economic benefit, 99% of all priests, I don't care whether they're Muslim, Christians, and Jews, in secret or Masons. Are we clear? Yeah. Masonry is not a negative. Masonry is essentially to preserve knowledge of the ancient world and humanity on the planet Earth. And we're not talking about the criminal acts that people in these different fraternal orders may adopt for themselves, distinguished from what these things mean. If you want to, on the surface, understand what Masonry is and means, simply look at the mothers in this room. That's for you sons. And then when you go to the bathroom, pull up your shirt and look at your belly button. And know who made you. Your mother and you're the son. And the study of the dynamics of the human species on the earth, the mother is the stargate, and you're her son. And Allah is a feminine name, and it applies to womanhood herself and not a masculine figure with a turban sitting on the throne over top of the Kaaba in Mecca. And that's an exaggeration, but I'm just saying that to say that people's concept about what they think things are and what priesthood really know for themselves in scholarship are two different things. But if you tell the people the truth, most of these clubs will not survive. Do you get the point? Meaning that most of these well-dressed, robed guys that claim got a personal relationship with Jesus, God, Allah, Moses will have to get a J.O.B. I mean, they'll have to start producing something for real. And knowledge supersedes their capacity to use mind control, hypnotism, emotionalism, to tell you finally that God's broke and he needs $5. But God's got everything, but he's always broke. And I just want to remind you this week, because apparently y'all forgot it last week.
Jesus loves you.
Didn't you say that last week? I mean, I'm convinced. What's next? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to be humorous, but it's really cruel what they have done to humanity. And it appears innocent, and it has gone unchallenged. Well, here it's challenged, and we ain't going for it, because we know that they've been working with Rome. We got the evidence that they've been working with Rome, and all scholars have the evidence that they've been working with Rome, but very few people will speak up because they're also murderers. And usually when people that really do scholarship find these things out, they will murder them. Particularly when they find out the relationship of the political realm and the dogmatic realm that is presented to the masses as the spiritual realm. If you get the point. For those of you who know anything about the economic systems and politics and the military ordnance systems, what order on the planet Earth is the largest stockholder in world arsenals? If you know, don't speak, raise your hand. If you know. I see one. Look around the room, you all. Look around the room. Look around the room. I'm going to repeat this question to you. And I would like you to look at your own selves and critique the response. The largest stockholder, organized order on Earth planet, Gaia, is what political order? Raise your hand. Look around the room, y'all, because y'all looking all forward. Now, look at this. Look at the people that's in this room and understand that your mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers and all that kind of stuff aunts and uncles, and our community is suffering terribly. And if you don't know what's up, what chance do these children have? We're just talking about just reading, just words itself. Now we're just talking about the politics that's connected to them words. The largest stockholder of the arsenals on planet Earth is the Church of Rome. They're the largest stockholders of the world's arsenals that murder people on the planet Earth. But they always talk about God's love and peace. So apparently when you go into that book that the people say they know, it says somebody's presenting themselves as the peacemakers, but they're really the peace breakers.
That's right.
And the masses keep looking for the mystical devil. And the ones that's regulating it keep in tune with the communities. This is a network. And reporting is standing right there under the cinfoil window behind a pool pit and never suspected that they're vampires. Scholars know it, but they're dangerous vampires too. You know, so these people who don't really understand the real history, the real law, divine law, the ancient books, don't know that that vampire is eating some of the missing children and raping them too. They ain't got a skull and bones agreement with the Vatican. And they actually have shadow houses in every community that regulate the community. They even tag, say, 20 years ahead, whose houses they're going to take. And they'll have plans laid out on how they're going to alter and modify the cities, and you be thinking that you're stable. And that you think that the members of the Circle Church and the Chancery are doing Jesus things and things for the Lord of Jesus. They're working for the Lords of London. And they're right in your face. They're called lawyers and bankers. They are the direct members of the Circle Church. The Chancery. Did you notice that when they steal these people's houses, and they be sending you instruments from law offices claiming to be courts, they'll present arguments for those who challenge you in Chancery Court? Did you notice that? How many of y'all know that? If they hearing an argument on a house foreclosure, if it goes in courts, it's going to Chancery. Controlled by the Chancellor in England. By Knights Templars who are members of the Circle Church, working with the bankers, and the bank is really the bench collection arm for the Vatican. Are we clear? And I'm saying that to you because a lot of the things that we're dealing with people, particularly people that become cognate of the miseries that have taken place on the planet, is because the Romans are liquidating people's estates. And we want you, on your own merit, to be able to competently start countering or rebutting Rome's claims against your estate without us having to be redundantly going over things over and over and over again. That if you use certain fundamental rules in reading, that you will begin to solve your own problems. Are we clear?
Clear.
Are we clear?
Clear.
All right. Good. Give Brother Mike, and then give the mic to Brother Troy after that. Go ahead.
Turn it on.
Just wanted to read Chancery.
Chancery, go ahead.
Equity, equitable jurisdiction, a court of equity, the system of jurisprudence administered in courts of equity. That's what Chancery is.
All right, now, when you all get used to this, and another reason I'm bringing this up, you know, how many of you were here just this past week when Brother Comento was here? And he was giving you some refined instruction. Excellent class. A class like that actually should be a workshop. But I think you did an excellent job. And it's an indicator of what our intent is for you. But we want you to be competent. Are we clear? We don't want to load you with things and then you just accept things and you really, upon a test, don't get it. This is why a lot of times when I'll present, I'll tell you to raise hands. And you see how many hands were raised of these adults in this class? So I always take the position of not trying to overload, because clearly the indicators are that many things that are basic you're not paying attention to, or you're not absorbing. Do you understand? And we want you to cure. We don't want you to, oh man, that was tight, man, and clap. We don't want that. You know, we want, if you're going to play basketball, be able to dribble.
Sure.
You know, if you're going to get in the boxing ring, you know, don't start taking selfies. You know, hold that left hand up, cover the face, defend yourself. Jab. You know, don't get in the ring talking about, you know, what did you say about jabbing? Meanwhile, the guy going, ow, you don't really want that. And a lot of the injury happens to us because we don't know basic rules. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Yes.
Now, please, but
Just point of interjection about.
Point of interjection, go ahead.
About the definition.
Point of interjection, go ahead.
About the definition from Black's Law Dictionary again. Page 71.
Page 71, Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Adult. Civil law. A male infant who has attained the age of 14, a female infant who has attained the age of 12. All right, so adult. Just a point of
Well, now make it clear again.
All right.
And speak for what you know.
All right, it's a big baby, in other words, an adult, infant.
Yes.
And so to call ourselves adults,
Does not necessarily mean maturity.
right.
However, this is the key. Now back up again, and this is back to where assumptions are. Assumptions. Read that again, and I'm going to explain that to you. Read it very clearly, distinctly.
Adult, civil law. A male infant who has attained the age of 14, a female infant who has attained the age of 12.
Go ahead.
And then common law. One who has attained the legal age of majority, generally 21 years, though in some states women are legally adults at 18. And then it goes into the Western common law.
All right. There's two things that are presented there. And this is where you must understand divine law and nature's law, distinguished from political and legacy operations, as an example. Female always matures quicker than the male because female is purer than the male. Male is a modified female. All eggs are females. So mothers makes her sons out of her own self daughter. When the cell splits, it's called a daughter cell. So we're talking divine law distinguished from what people believe. In proper cultivation and civilization, the education of the fetus or Muslim, which is a fetus, it's not a belief system. Muslim is a fetus. And a Muslim must submit to the will of Allah, which is the mother, for what she builds in the temple in her womb manifests as the temple of man. In true, proper culture before Roman Inquisition operations that put the world back over 500 years, the education systematically done on points of three, and the evolution of the womb on a triplicity of the three, the triple three of the nine, right? And based on Ezekiel's will or the chart, because the woman would deal, woman being a walking calendar on 13, which is why the dark priesthood will not acknowledge a 13th floor to a building. They're called a mezzanine. You get the point. Is because woman is the walking calendar, and also the natural order on the earth planet is a matriarchy in government principle. When the culture or the applied science of the number 9, the workings of the womb, is applied in proper culture, the child, according to the nature of the constellation and the energies that the mother puts into the temple of the body, she teaches the child accordingly. This is one of the reasons why it was very important from a political perspective for the Romans to burn libraries around the world. In what is called the Great Book Burnings, you're talking about Librorum, Index Librorum, Expurgatorius, Index Librorum Prohibitorum. And it is not unlike what we're talking about the priesthood here. They themselves know that the children come out the womb already educated. Are we clear? Yes. When the mother knows the truth of the workings of the womb and the power of the womb. Therefore, the priesthood will never teach women the truth about religion. Why? Because she's Allah. That's right. And she has been overthrown.
Yes.
Islam.
Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, the nature of things. In harmony with the 12 constellations that rule this particular solar system, that point of 12 represents maturity. If taught properly, at the age of 12, females totally competent, except in a society where she has not been taught. Are we clear? Now, the Son of Man, the Son of Man is the Son of Woman. Woman is man. It's the species. It's not gender. Paternity, pater, father, is a process, not the gender.
Islam.
So, truthfully, all there is mother.
Islam.
In truth. And we are the sons of God. Are we clear?
Clear.
What is it that the priesthood don't want the people to know? What I just said. So they want to keep these children in the infant mind so they can rape them. Are we clear?
Clear.
Now the sons, because we're wide, so that's why we hop in one way. And she's the X. X marks the spot. Right?
Yes.
And so we're always like 2-3 years behind. Like when we growing up and stuff. Because even with us, even now, most men know basically kind of like we stay boys. And we front. Like when sisters come around, we're like, yeah. They leave, man, we be playing and doing stupid shit. We do.
Oh, man.
We can have an old piece of jumped up car.
It's a stick too.
We don't care about what's showing up. Sis comes around, we want to do mags and all that stuff, polishing the car like we care. Let's be honest. So there's a balance. Mother refines us. You know what I mean? Like us, hey. We can have pocket full of fiat, sleep on the floor, sleep in a chair, with a soda, some popcorn, looking at TV. They come in, we be straightening stuff up like we. Yeah, let me fix this and stuff. Trying to impress somebody. But I'm just saying that's what we stay boys, let's be honest. And it's not that we're really absolutely like that, but for the most part we stay boys. So by nature women mature quicker than us. Politically, for political purposes and extortion, the priesthood suppressed women mentally so that they can use the mental themselves to suppress their other developments. Are we clear?
Clear.
Then the priesthood can feed on them. Are we clear?
Clear.
Particularly if they can keep them naive because they will deliver their children to them. And they do. They do. Now when you're dealing with inheritances, go into wardship tenures. Wardship. Give her the mic. I want you to look at this because this is absolutely connected, you all. And I'm glad that you're bringing these things up, Dee, because you have insight, and I appreciate that.
Yes, we did.
But I want to show you how this is all related. Wardship tenures. Go into your Black's Law Wardship. W-A-R-D-S-H-I-P. And this is also important because this would give you an understanding of why certain things we say consistently and why we say to you these things are important. Because they may not appear to you important if you're not aware of the politics, the real politics, not what they tell you, the actual politics and the actual economics. Let me also remind you this. You know what is practiced by Europeans who operate under European colonial operations in the Western Hemisphere? That they teach each other, particularly in secret societies and in economics? It is important that the masses never discover that labor generates capital. Capital does not generate labor. But they must be encouraged to believe that capital generates labor. This is so that you would never value your labor or your real skills. This is another reason why it's important for them to miseducate you and make sure that you don't pay attention to the etymon, separating the wheat from the chaff, separating the denotation from the connotation. It doesn't mean you dismiss connotation, it means you must use it always cognately. Are we clear?
Clear.
And particularly when you're reading any legal document. Are we clear?
Clear.
And so it's also important for you to recognize that harmonic with that is in government structure, you're not looking at synonyms, but you're looking in the area of synonyms and antonyms, etc., like that. You can look at the Republic and allodial principles, harmonic, and then you look at feudal law and the democracy platform as harmonic. Are we clear? So the robbery of the people institutionalized is done under the democracy platform. If you're not thinking critically, you may not be one who paid attention to that. Are we clear?
Clear.
Nevertheless, scholars know that. They know that the democracy platform is mobocracy. And that the republic platform recognizes statesmanship and the allodial rights of the people. They are actually opposite poles. And much of the misery economically and politically that people suffer is that they are being governed de facto under democracy platforms set up in 1861, counter to and in contradistinction to the republic platform that was set up under the legitimate organic constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, i.e. all persons operating in the government at North America, federal, state, and municipal, etc., or local, are imposters and de facto, they were all criminals since 1861. It has nothing to do with what they tell you or what their intent is, or that's my cousin and you like them. They're all organized criminals. And this is why you're in the misery. This is again why they're liquidating people's estates, because, which we talked about before, the conversion. We don't need to get into that. You already know that. We've done it redundantly, but you need to know what that is. And again, why we chose this subject matter tonight, specificity of definitions. Because when we ask certain questions, opening up, we don't want to see a whole room full of adults and then 3 people raise their hand on elementary subject matter that's affecting your life every day. Which is why most of you are here. We're here for remedy, not to feel good. Well, we feel good because it's got the fruit over there. But, we're here for remedy. And so I'm telling you, that's our intent. Our intent is remedy and recourse. Are we clear? We're not here to make you feel good, and we're not here to pump fake spirituality at you. We're here to honestly, with true desire and intent, for us all collectively to become more competent and for us to start preserving our estates for ourselves and for the generations to come. All of which at present are under siege, and what you have left is under attack. Being cognizant of it is important, because what you recognize that many people aren't cognizant that the hypothecation activities are rampant and they're going on. They think it's circumstantial. My cousin next door, man, they foreclosed on his house and stuff, and he came yesterday and took all his stuff out and stuff like that and put it on the curb and stuff. And I seen the sheriff and his boys, they stole the TV and stuff. And that's in our communities is becoming a norm. However, the general masses are not aware is that the action is unlawful. 2, you can't foreclose on a contract that was closed unless you have an action of fraud. They don't know that all property, including your labor, has been hypothecated for the barristers of England and the general operators of the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve of the Bishopric Circle Church and Chancery in England on behalf of the Popes of Rome, enforced by the United States Service Military Operations and the subdivisional operators in contract of the gangs of New York who made contracts with the Circle Church and the Chancery and called themselves policemen. So the people don't recognize they're a really organized gang. They're not law officers. We're not talking about what the individual persons may be or what their intention may be. We're talking about what the real politics are. Are we clear?
Clear.
And usually when they're stealing people's property, they will be on the door across the street. Even though by law, the sheriff is the one supposed to issue writs of execution. With a raised seal court order of an Article 3 judge, whereas the claimant or the right or tenant must be taken and challenged in a court of law on due process. Not only that, if it were a foreclosure, any emoluments and anything in escrow And any generated funds from the promissory note was supposed to be delivered to them. And they robbed them, and it's usually more than what the house costs anyway. You know, and so all of these things are done every day, and we don't have to tell you that most of the people don't even know that these activities and these aspects of mortgages and the transfers of separation of the mortgages and the promissory note that generates finance on the stock market, etc., that already compensated for the house, etc., and set off, that's what we return to these people even when they do foreclose. So really, on most of these foreclosures, if they told the truth, even if they did foreclose, they would have to give you, in your hand, physically, finance that's usually more than what that house costs, and you'd simply be able to go out and buy another one. They're gonna rob that too, and rob the estate too. Which is again why we're doing specificity of definitions. Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to interject.
Wardship.
Wardship. Write this down, you all.
In military tenures, the right of the Lord to have custody as guardian of the body and lands of the infant heir, without any account of profits until he was 21 or she 16. In soakage, the guardian was accountable for profits, and he was not the lord, but the nearest relative to whom the inheritance could not descend. And the wardship ceased at 14. In copyholds, the lord was the guardian, but was perhaps accountable for profits.
All right. So now, when the Congress adjourned sine die, in 1861.
I forgot to tell the page 1755 in Black's Law Dictionary. I apologize.
Say it again. Okay.
Page 1755,
All right.
Black's Law Dictionary,
All right.
4th edition. I apologize.
Now you would go. Now we're not going to do this exercise, but we want others to write this down. So you're going to do this in your spare time because we don't have to keep repeating classes. Minor, minority, impropria persona, status and estate, and then I'll continue back to the issue of the 12 and the 14 and the 16 and the 21. All right? So now you're talking estate law. And what Woodrow Wilson was setting up in 1913, and this is why we share with you all House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June the 5th of 33, and remind you all to break that down and pay attention. And one day we're going to go maybe through the congressional record and deal with Louis McFadden's speech and plan to sue the Board of Governors for the Inquisition Revenue Services, which you know as the Internal Revenue Services. That is the Inquisition Revenue Services for conversion purposes. And that only exists because of the democracy platform. Keep in mind that could not exist under the Republic platform. Well, clear?
Clear.
All right. So on the 27th, when they did sine die, there was actually a coup d'etat. Now, this is for you, those of you who don't know. Many of you know, but I don't want to go into that because we've been over it over and over again. You've got to understand this. Within the 10-year span, generally with the Act of Congress of February 2nd, 1871, that's when they perfected, in that span between 61 and 71, their democracy political platform. That means all of the members of the Circle Church, and the barristers were inculcated into Congress in breach of Article Amendment 13 with its 20 section, i.e. the Nobility Clause, with the specific purpose of institutionalizing peonage and connotative slavery at North America, with the intent that the masses be not aware that it was instituted. Are we clear? They set up Negro universities, and some of you know their names, but I'm not going to go into that because some people's feelings get hurt. For the specific purpose of grooming Negroite leaders to be appointed in tagged communities that these people do not know what a mortgage is, that they do not know what an allodial title is or aboriginal title is, and that these allodial instruments were modified in 1913 by Woodrow Wilson in agreement with members of the Circle Church, Knights Templars, and all the barristers, British Registry, etc., and hide from the people that the United States is really a private corporation belonging to the Jesuits. So the job of the Negroite leader guys in their training was to teach you and promote the brand system, meaning that, like, instead of teaching the people the truth of their bloodline or pedigree, they would teach them that they're light-skinned people, and there's dark-skinned people, and then there's black people, and brown is really black, and so is copper is really black, and things like that, and train the people like little boys and girls and monkeys that this is linguistically and anthropologically correct and scientifically correct. And with a few generations that they would be able to control the narrative, and the people would actually adopt these as identities. And then the corporate state could escheat their properties and their land, and then give grants and patents to Europeans, and then block the heirs of the estates from claiming their lands because they would be listed outside of the human family under nom de guerre and would not be aware that a mortgage and a deed is a sharecropping agreement.
That's right.
Are we clear?
Yes.
And so they would start working to get a mortgage and get a deed, and not knowing that they're sharecropping, and after a couple generations wouldn't even know what an allodial title is or that it ever even existed. And so that's what Wilson did in 1913. Now, cutting through the chase, when the corporate entity went bankrupt again, it actually prior to 1925, they re-registered again, but it actually broke down twice. And so in 1933, and this goes from 32 and 34, Lewis McFadden made issue with it and was bringing suit. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, European, used, because they had already used a claim on the children through the marriage certificates. Now they made claim on the hatched eggs through the birth certificates, being bank bonds to back the United States corporation private foreigners' debt. This is called conversion again. And that has been going on a consistent basis around the country. And this, and while it may seem odd to you or unrelated, this has much to do with them bombing cities around the country where Asiatics were making progress, just like in Tulsa. You know, which they will tag falsely in history as Black Wall Street, if you get the point. Because their mission is to steal the estates and then have the people forget that they're colonists and that they're exercising unum sanctum policy. So they pay the black leaders from the college that they set up to start talking about racism and colors and jobs. And that's their missionary work. And then, you know, these people are hanging on a rope, and their job is to say, they open the Bible and say, everything's all right, you're in a better place, keep hope alive, stuff like that. While you're choking on a rope. And then they get a piece of the spoils in the background while shouting Jesus and Allah and stuff like that. And the people don't suspect that these people are tied to Rome. And these are the operations that have been taking place in North America for quite some generations, which is again why some people who get wind of us teaching you this real history and law get upset with us. Because what happens is when you expose Rome, it also exposes their minions. Right? And when you start becoming cognate of what's up and you all start setting up trust and stuff like that, even though you're not totally competent, and you start setting up trust and stuff like that, what it does, it interrupts their capacity to transfer to see this trust that are actually operative in New York on Wall Street. Are we clear?
Clear.
And this is again why we encourage you all to do that. And again, this is again why we're doing the specificity of definitions, because we would that when we ask you certain questions, that at least 2/3 of the people raise their hand.
All right.
At least.
All right.
You know, we know that we're making inroads. We know that your heart is there. So it's not a critique to the negative. It is an appeal to you to have some cognizance as to how much trouble you're really in. You know, the people really don't know how much trouble they're in. And I think a lot of times, because we present this information on a casual platform, that people underestimate it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? They underestimate its importance. And it's important for you to exercise this knowledge, because that's what's going to save you. Are we clear? You're not being saved in the netherworld. Right here, the kingdom is on the earth, ain't on a cloud. So let's get over that dynamics. Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, give Brother Troy the mic, because I know he was trying to share something with us. No, we're going to get you in that picture. Now, Black's Law Dictionary, or you can go, I want you to go also in your basic dictionary, I want you to deal with movement. Movement. Now, Sister Dick. She's right in the midst of. She's right here, like. No, pick on me.
Movement. It's a noun.
Yes.
Act or process of moving, a particular manner of moving, chiefly plural in action or activity, as of a person or a body or persons. Military, naval, change of position or location of troops or ships. 5, rapid progress or events, or abundance of events or incidents. The progress of events, as in narrative or drama. The suggestion of action, as in pertaining or the like. A series of action or activities directed or tending toward a particular end. An anti-slavery movement. The course of tendency or trend of affairs in a particular field. The price change in the market of some commodity or security. An evacuation of the bowels. A material evacuated. The works, or a distinct portion of the works of a mechanism, as a watch. Music, a principal division, a section of a sonata, a symphony, or the like. Motion, rhythm, time, tempo, and rhythmical structure of character. And it says
All right,
motion.
now,
I'm reading from the American College Dictionary.
Let me ask you this question and do an analysis. Remember the conversation we were having the other day, Dean, relative to the prophet said for us to make changes?
Yes.
All right, and also the most divine and national movement of the world. And also people who do not understand what movement means, which does not mean static or standing still or non-change. Movement is designed in an action of social engineering to change a condition of a people or to counter something that is present at point. To remove from one point to another, whether state of mind, state of being, state of cognizance, state of condition. Morris Divine and National Movement is designed not to stay the same, but to progress. In the order of countering connotative slavery, which is a mental condition due to someone on an outside force under de facto means controlling the narrative. Therefore, as a countermeasure, one of the specificities that the Prophet Noble commanded all Moors to do is to produce literature as a countermeasure, and in order that it have a quality and a stability and in a line with customs of truth. He said, go back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers. And of course, when you do that, you will start finding out the misprision, other modifications that took place that are both untoward, untrue, and not in harmony with the principles upon which the movement was founded. Therefore, if one is to take the approach of carrying out the instructions in the divine warning by the prophet for the nation, one would look at specificity of definitions in order to guide yourself in a changing world.
Islam.
Are we clear? And you would understand that as it's presented on one surface, it is not its conclusory intent. Therefore, you would comprehend the Old Canaanite Temple, restoration of the estate, reintroduction to the culture and traditions, Moorish Temple of Science, also called Moorish Holy Temple of Science, civic organization teaching government, etc., interchanging with Marcus Garvey was teaching government structure, etc. Then the countermeasure that was made by the Europeans on an infiltration basis to neutralize the progress of the movement, and he adopted a religious affidavit in 1928 as a countermeasure to what the Europeans did, and with other persons among our own who were doing things to undermine the movement, to protect the movement. He used Heard's law. We're talking structured government. And so he reminded the Moors so that they would not be confused with the action, knowing that many of them, except for the Arabs, Sheiks, etc., and some of the people who were scholars, did not know that Islam means law, order, and governmental principles. So he's dealing with specificity of definitions of purpose. Are we clear? Clear. Now, people who don't understand that would look at people who would exercise the action on the comprehension of the word as being in opposition to those who take a passive or static position on the word and try to remain in 19 and 13, in 19 and 20, and think that they're carrying out the movement. What they have done is violated.
Because it's
As a countermeasure, and for cognitive purposes, the Prophet Obrali even wrote an article in the newspaper, which is one of our most important instruments, which he commanded to be preserved, for us to make changes. And he also reminded us that the movement and his philosophy is based on a Rotarian principle, which means universal. And so the movement and the philosophy is universal. And so you would use that as a what? A reference point or a cornerstone to measure your actions. And the constitutional principle upon which it is founded, you would always use that as a guide and a maxim. Are we clear? Now, recognizing that you're dealing with the world's largest estate, logically those who benefit from the theft of the birthright, the parasites. So a parasite in biology lives off the virtues of its host. Is that correct?
Yes. That's right.
So an exploiter or a colonist in politics lives off the virtue of its host. Therefore, in order to deceive the platform, they must present a false paradigm and yet at the same time control the narrative. All clear?
Clear.
So what do we recognize when we go back to the state of mind of our ancient mothers and fathers? We find the allodial principles of Muslim law upon which the Constitution is founded. And then we see the feudal law operations that are taking place today. And then we'll make reference points to see where an interjection was made to contaminate the platform.
Yeah.
Then you discover the Act of Congress, 1871. Are we clear? Then for those who, because the Congress keeps records and the journals of the House. All right? So then you start seeing the Trading with the Enemy Act, the War Act, the Negro Act, etc. Right? And you start recognizing that the different legislation that was taking place since 1861 are all in relationship to enforcing and administering a smooth platform for feudal law operations. It is important for those who are exercising de facto powers to also deal with measures by which the people would be pleased with or accepting of this imposter platform, with imposter persons claiming sovereign authority activity. Are we clear?
Clear?
Clear.
That, in fact, is what took place and what is taking place now. Right? So, what is the other problem that we have? People who do not use critical thinking, and that is many, are not aware of what is in operation because they're not aware that you have a de facto platform operating against you in the name of government. Are we clear? Any instrument that comes from the desks of any of their operatives is feudal in character. They will not produce an allodial instrument. Are we clear? Knowingly and by operative directive. So what you have is a secret oligarchy, only secret to the people who can't read, or the people who don't know the real politics. Not a secret to scholars. Not a secret to politicians around the world. Definitely not secret to the priesthood, because they're at the background. They're the shadow. And the least suspected. Are we clear? but the masses at large are not cognizant of it. And with the miseries or the injuries that they suffer every day, by not knowing what they're dealing with, they have no competent action administered among themselves for remedy, or as a counter, or as a rebuttal to an actual attack that's inculcated and entrenched. And usually, if approaching it, they would usually start arguing an improper subject matter in relationship to what's going on, and therefore be declared incompetent. And therefore, by force of law, or by action of law, or operation of law, abandon the estate that they don't know is what they're arguing, because they're arguing attitude. When you analyze these operations, and particularly between 25 and 28, and then you look at the authority on the back of the questionnaire and look at the timing, etc., you understand the countermeasures Durali had to make and is forced to make changes. Are we clear? Clear. Now, because the people themselves, most of them, and I would assume this because I wasn't there, not unlike when we told people to raise their hands here, it was probably the same thing there, and maybe even less. You had a bunch, thousands of people that didn't know anything about trust law, anything about estate, very little about birthright. They hear it, or nationality, or national principles. And we're usually approaching the Moorish divine national movement from a perspective of a belief distinguished from an estate issue. Are we clear? Not knowing the difference between religion and divine law. So what I ask you to do is read us in the dictionary, in your unabridged dictionary, divine.
Divine.
Divine. Stay in your mic. Voila.
Adjective. Of or pertaining to a god, especially the supreme being. Addressed or appropriated to God, religious sacred. Proceeding from God, godlike characteristics of or befitting a deity. Heavenly, celestial, being a god, befitting a deity, pertaining to divinity or theology, of superhuman or surpassing excellence. One verse in divinity, a theologian, a priest or clergyman, to discover or declare something obscure or future, as by supernatural means, prophecy, to perceive by intuition or insight, conjecture. And then
intuition, insight, conjecture. Go ahead.
Archaic, to pretend.
So now we're going archaic, that means the ancient. Go ahead.
To use or practice divination, prophecy, to have perception by intuition or insight, conjecture, and it says Middle English, Latin, divinus, and Middle English.
So what you see, divination is really dealing with cosmology, astrology.
Wow.
Mathematical calculation on studying of the stars and the workings of nature. That is related to denotation in your first instances, or the first definitions that were presented are actually presentments under a connotative presentment and not the original meaning. You must be able to do that and recognize that. This is why we're dealing with specificity of definitions. How many people would not recognize that?
Most.
they would take the first entries that are presented as the absolute truth. However, that's complicated. That's not what it really originally means. Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, what they would do for controlling the narrative, that means controlling the mind or the education, they would take the denotation and push it down to the bottom, and then introduce the connotative presentments at the top. And that's what the people take as their educational basis. And then whoever set that up now controls the minds who adopt the connotation. While the priesthood themselves remain with the archaic, because that's the foundation. Are we clear?
Clear.
This is the key on how they miseducate people, and this is the key on how they maintain their power over the people. Now I want to remind you this. This is why all Privy Council orders have antechambers. And antechambers, they make sure they don't violate that rule. Are we clear?
Clear.
So they know that the narrative controllers do what you call flipping. They turn everything upside down. So if you want to know what something means, start from the bottom and read up. So I wanted to show you that, to show you and to express to you why we're doing specificity of definitions. Because we want you to be more effective. All right? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that with that same concept, which is why we go to the oldest dictionaries we can find. The etymology, which is the denotative meaning
Yes.
of the word, the entries are going to be closer to the etymology, the older the dictionary.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the newer dictionaries, the true denotative
Are
meaning of
watered
words
out.
are way going to be usually lower.
Are watered out.
That's right.
Are watered out. Now, is that college?
Yeah.
Now, look of God. Now, how many of you know what this is called? How many of you know what this is called? Let me see. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Ain't enough, but it's better than it was before. All right, decide on what's it called. Big trash. And then we can challenge you.
There, with your check.
How do you even know this? Yeah, I know what it is. Well, what is it? Can we hear that again? Perfect thing. I didn't know what they said. All right, what is it, y'all?
Swastika.
What is it also called?
The good being.
The good being. That's where you get the commonly used phrase, the supreme being. For it is the symbol of the workings of nature. Generation of life. Your four gates is also referenced as Yahweh. YHWH. Earth, air, fire, water. The elements of building. Counterclockwise, it is the rotational point of the zodiac field. Are we clear?
Clear?
So, for the priesthood, the study of that circle, the rotation at that point, right? Y'all got that? I want you to pay attention to this. You got that? I'm going to do this a little larger because I really want you to pay attention to this. It's very important. This is purpose for you because we want to empower you. But we want you to think beyond this moment because we don't have the time to refine everything. Are we clear? So, swastika means the good being. Very often in the archaic world, all over the planet, you all, when a mother chose a son for a mate, who she wanted for a mate, they would ritualistically use henna and paint this in the palm of her hand.
Islam.
And she would dance and go and pick a son. And usually they would dance in circles. And when she chose a mate, she would raise her leg and go like that, and that's who the mate is. Then, before they were chosen, it would also be known to charge them everyone. It's already known by the griots.
Islam.
Are we clear?
Clear.
Because that's part of the culture. Are we clear?
Clear.
So harmonies would already be predetermined, that part of it.
Yes.
And usually they do a ritual for 3 days. They go through the ritual for 3 days. And then the sons would dress up all beautiful and stuff, whatever, to try to impress them. You know, like birds do?
So the plumage.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. This is aside from the issue of the mothers and the fathers that you have to go through. All right?
Yep.
Now, that's called the good being, and the priesthood hides the fact that it's cosmology and that they study the science. Excuse my circle, all right? Kind of.
Oh boy.
Well, this guy can't draw, man. But anyway. And you're dealing with the aggregate, or what you call the lower chambers of the earth. Right? The physical. All right? And so they lower the bottom pole. All right? You got that? Huh?
Islam.
And this is the German tribes studying the culture. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Clear.
And the German word for the great circle is, that's the name of that symbol.
Islam.
Amen. Amen Ra.
Which means the great circle of the zodiac.
Yes.
Are we clear?
Clear.
And this would be, and cathode, this would be Catholic from. Cathode It's also because everything is energy and electricity.
Yes.
And magnetism and electricity are harmonics in engineering. That's right. So that would be the south. That would be the north node, right? It's actually over here. It's called when you're looking into the universe.
Yes.
Now, when we're coming in from the outside, it's reversed. And this is where the priesthood will calculate the deacons and the cardinal points, and they would give the news.
Islam.
That's how you get the news. Go ahead. And so the priesthood would always be the reporters, all right? But they would do it by following the stars, and so they would be called Sayaraha, or the wise men follow the stars. They would do a chart of the stars. And also, this would be the basis upon which the houses of the constellations are charted. I'll get with you. So when you deal with these are called cardinal points. Also called noble points.
Wow.
Cardinal points. Right? And this is where you get cardinal in the church. All of your angels, these are divided into 3 of 3. So each one of these are 10 degrees in here too.
Islam.
Are we clear?
Clear.
This is 45 degrees, which is 9, and this is 90 degrees out here. So your 90 degrees out here comprises 360 degrees, full circle, or 100%, or alpha and omega. Now you're dealing with what is called the mundane cross. It's also called the Coptic cross. So it's dealing with the science of earth, or earth science. So in geometry and in engineering, in single line, this would be the glyph for the earth. Are we clear?
Clear.
In metaphysics, when you're studying the science of the universe, cosmology, etc., astrology, and the combination of the divination and determinations and interpretations of the energies, it would be the same as that, but would have the 3 3s in each corner. Excuse my scribbling. In that form, it would be called the master seal. It would be called the master seal. All right? In the aggregate world, when you're dealing with, polarization, duality, laws of nature, all right, you would have this would be aggregate, right? So this would be in this aggregate form. When you're capable of activating the knowledge of this, then you get into the aggregate and the abstract, right?
Islam.
And then your poles will become abstracts. And your 3 gates, or your 3 houses in the mansion at the 4 corners, The 3 and the 4, or 3 plus 4 equals what?
7.
So the knowledge of that in the logos degree will be circle 7.
Islam.
But it's all the same thing.
Islam.
But there's different degrees.
Islam.
Now, the issue is for you to understand what you're looking at, and for you to become competent in operations of this. This is what Hassan is dealing with the workshop tomorrow. Those of you who come to the workshop, he'll be refining a lot of the culture. And understand, this is earth culture. This is the culture of the planet. It's not alien. You know, like one of the things I recognize too when you get into the science is that people think that there's more science, that the rabbis don't deal with this, and that the imams don't deal with this. They all deal with this in secret.
Yes.
But in public, they will just do different things like this in a ritual. Like say in Islam, in the creed, not science, they would go 7 times counterclockwise around the cube, or Kaaba,
Islam.
which means the cube.
Islam.
That's called circumambulation. In the book of Revelation, it would say, I heard one speak with a voice of many waters, and they were standing among 7 golden candlesticks. There's your 7. All right? Now, the gold is symbolic of the alchemical metal of the sun and its transits in its ecliptic. Is that not correct?
Islam.
Now, the deal is, when the priesthood is telling the truth about the books, they would make sure that the people knew this. But instead, they keep it for themselves. This is the source of their power. And the people are always kept in mystery. Are we clear?
Clear.
And this is also why, in this particular solar system, that the 7 is so important, the number 7. Because it's the root of earth culture. Go ahead.
Islam, Brother Taj, you had mentioned north, east, west, and south as the news, and we had mentioned the cardinal points. I just wanted to add to your wisdom that the 4 cardinals, when the first letters of each of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, are arranged, it's the first 4 letters in the word calculation.
Of course.
Islam.
Because that's what it is, calculation. That's what calculus is.
Islam.
And then when you're dealing with the angles and the radii, it's called spiritual geometry.
Islam.
So when you look at, say, the ancient universities, which we call mosques, they were originally universities, right? You'll see all of the structures are compound spiritual geometry.
Yes.
Everything is expressed in spiritual geometry.
Mm-hmm.
Very elaborate.
Very.
Very elaborate. You know, however, on the surface, with most people that go to these different institutions, they're not taught that. They're just taught the rituals of making Hajj, you know, and I'm not knocking it, you know,
right.
But as far as the real science of life, except in certain areas, most of them don't get it either. You know, we learn to perfect imagery without the knowledge, if you get the point. You know, rituals without the knowledge.
Islam.
Even when, say, Ramadan, dealing with the movement of the moon. But its origin and its purpose is understanding body and cleansing the body. So you give a ritual to teach undisciplined people how to take care of their body. If you really understood how things work, that's right for everybody. It's not a belief system. It's a science for health.
Islam.
Same thing with ablution.
Yes.
You know, But then even with the element of water, it's retention of memory.
Yes.
You know, it's health purposes and etc. But I want to present that to you, to also present to you that even when you're dealing with the angels or the angles, when you deal with the angles that would be enumerated around the wheel, these are called deaconates. And this is where you get deacon in the church. While the priest would tell the people, don't you be looking at astrology stuff. It's the devil. Illuminati of eating bologna sandwiches in the dark corner. Well, it spooks people up, and so people don't study, and so they control the narrative. Meanwhile, all of them, in fact, know the science. And then for controlling the masses, they agree to give the science in anthropomorphic formats in different platforms, which is called secularism. And when you trace it, if you're a scholar, you can trace it all back to one origin. Misrepresented to the masses, if you get the point. So again, when you deal with specificity of definitions, you can find this stuff on your own. Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, because of the, let's keep it blunt, because they're cheap as hell. Even though they're robbing people. They won't put the finance in the architecture like they used to. You know, but if you deal with the architecture of churches, mosques, and synagogues, they're all based on astrology.
Yes.
Their architecture is based on astrology. They deal with 3, 5, 7s, 12s, 13s. Or clear.
Clear.
The cinque-foil window, it's called cinque-foil because it usually would have 5 panels, 5 lights. And it usually would be metered from the floor, and it would shine down on the uterus, which they'll call a pulpit system now. Pulpit. And as the sun moves or transits in the sky, it would send a light across the uterus, which is the pulpit. And the pews on both sides are really the fallopian tubes and the eggs. And the birth canal is the aisle, and the 2 pillars at the door is the 2 legs. And they'll sometimes paint the doors red, representing blood. And then they'll have the pyramid or pedestal at the top, at the front entry, representing the penis.
Wow.
And that's based on the structure of the body and operations of nature.
That's fine.
All right, so the church or the circle or the operations of the zodiac wheel is to be applied in preparing families. So the knowledge of it, in harmony with the workings of the womb, is how you build the Temple of Solomon, which is these physical. And the Temple of Solomon that you see in South America and also in Hikupta, because we always do things in doubles. So what you see on one side, you'll find on the other side of the planet, based on metrology. All right, so all cities are laid out by metrology, so write that down. Charting the stars. And I really didn't want to get into this too much because Hassan's going to hook y'all up like tightly tomorrow. So make sure everybody do your thing for tomorrow. Yeah. And again, you know, like the other thing that we were talking about earlier, when people are talking about more science, you'll find that a lot of people that come into the Moorish Divine and National Movement are not really taught the science. They are taught to confess that statement. Upon a test, most of them don't have science whatsoever. Which is again why it's difficult for sometimes they think that we're against them for teaching the science, and they're claiming to have the science, and most of them don't even get it. You know, the Arabs keep it to themselves for selfish cause, selfish reason. They don't really want the people to develop. Because most of the people, if they really understood Moorish culture, is predicated on merit. And most of the people in this particular corrupted culture are in positions based on politics and payoffs, not on qualifications. And so because of envy, greed, pettiness, and jealousy, they hold the people back. Because most of the people that really have the spirit for truth, if you tell them the truth, they will grow exponentially. Just the way you churn milk and butter just rise to the top. So you don't make a judgment, start churning milk. You understand? Butter rise to the top. So when you're dealing with the merit of beings, people would be assigned to their missionary work based on their qualifications. And how do you do it? You read a chart. And how do mothers prepare civilization? They read the chart, their womb, that Ankh, and the moon, and the transits, and the energies, and the foodstuffs that are around them, and plan life accordingly. It's called applied science of the number 9. Now understand this, that the Europeans use your science, which is why they're ruling you. To keep you from it, they always call it devil stuff. Are we clear?
Clear.
So that you don't examine it. And so they're ruling you with more science while publicly denying more science. Are we clear?
Clear.
On a political level, this is why you see all of the so-called founding fathers had Korans. But I guarantee you they didn't use them the way the believers do. And they got Torahs too. And they got Vedas too. Are we clear?
Clear.
But when they come out to the believers, they only have one book.
See, this is the only sandwich you're supposed to eat.
Why if not those other sandwiches and stuff? These guys got it going on. They be having $3,000 suits. It's a nice suit. Man, $3,000? Wow. Because they could. That's why.
That's fine.
And they do it with the widow's pennies. This is where Yeshua was disputing with the priesthood. So the priesthood hide all this by saying, look at the devil. He got the Gucci bag. And everybody said, yes, go kick the devil's ass. And the priest, they weren't really doing all the stuff. All clear?
Clear.
So this is why we're talking about specificity of definitions. And what I recognize too, and this is very important, so look at this. So when you're looking up a word, right? It's part of speech. First rule, right? It's etymon. That's the brackets, right? Right. Mm-hmm. Middle English, whether Sanskrit, very often they will not take you from the Germanic roots into Sanskrit or into, go ahead, interject.
When Brother Troy was reading movement, and I'm glad you brought up the Sanskrit, just very briefly, and then I yield the floor. Movement. It says movement comes from the Proto-Indo-European root meua, and meua is by the Sanskrit kamamuta, which denotes, and I quote, moved by love, end quote.
So the first rule of the 5 principles and the cure is what?
Love.
There you go. And so it is symbolized by what? By Venus, isn't it?
Islam.
Right? Right?
Right.
And with the operations of what? Family planning?
Family planning.
Then you got the crescent right here.
The womb.
And that becomes the egg
Mm-hmm.
in the universe.
Islam.
It's cosmos.
Yes.
That's earth science,
Yes. Mother and son.
isn't it?
Yes.
And that's the truth of all religion.
Islam.
Has nothing to do with what they say Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Zoroaster, doesn't matter.
Correct.
It's all just the workings of nature.
Yep.
Now, so what is the priest's job? To make them think this only applies to Islam. Right? That way he can divide the people against themselves and use them against each other, have them war with each other, and he comes, takes the spoils, and then say the devil did it. And that's how it's actually been working. Actually, that's what's been going on.
Islam.
You know, and people never suspect the priesthood. And so, again, that's why I shared this with you.
Islam.
Yeah. So you do what you can to fix them all, right?
Islam.
Islam. All right. Now, another word that I wanted you to look at is, after you looked up wardship tenures, I wanted you to look up minor and minority in Black's Law Dictionary. Give us the part. You can also look it up in your standard dictionary too, because I want you to give us the part of speech. And I want you to give us the headline. Go, Brother Troy. Give him the mic. You addressed already, right? You addressed. You were finished addressing the issue that you was questioning. So go ahead.
What is your question?
No, did you finish?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Was there something else that you were going to say earlier? All right. Pass it to Brother Troy. Now I want you to pay attention to this and put this in harmony with wardship tenures and military. So if you comprehend actually what we're leading to is that the people are being governed under wardship and they need to be made aware of it if they are not. Are we clear? So that we can start addressing what's actually happening as opposed to what people assume connotatively has been happening. Are we clear?
Clear.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead, brother.
Minor, an infant or person who is under the age of legal competence. One under 21, a term derived from the civil law, which described a person under a certain age as less than so many years. And then minor in some case law. Also less or less consideration.
Less
Lower.
consideration.
Lower person of inferior condition than the case law.
Now, read that last part again.
Also less. This is minor.
All right, yes.
Black's Law, 4th edition. Also less of less consideration. Lower. A person of inferior condition.
So our people think it means numerical count of Afrocentricity, and it actually is a caste system. So what occurs with people who can't read and they agree to be minority because the Negro leader guys call them that and they think it means Afrocentricity. They have agreed to a classification to the negation of their circumstance, and then they want to march and pray because they agreed to be lesser and think it's an identity just because they can't read.
Outside of the human family.
Aren't they responsible in law to know self? So isn't a knowledge of self primal in culture and civilization? Therefore, ignorance of the law is no excuse, is it? So therefore, these people don't know I, self, law, and master, and they're looking to follow some other man, and he screws them. Should they be pissed? Now, if they call this foreign European white man, and then he exercises that power, should they be mad?
No.
Because it means sovereign. So Black's Law Dictionary, Give us 3 white persons. Go, Troy. Now this is specificity of definitions.
3 white persons. Referred to in the Naturalization Act as...
Now stop right there, because we must be clear, because we want you to cross-reference and do research. The Naturalization Act of what? Of when?
1870.
Naturalization Act, what's the year?
July 14th, 1870.
So 1870, what happened with the Naturalization Act 1870? And what modifications were made in relationship to the Naturalization Act? How many people are aware? If you are, raise your hand. All right, tell us what occurred. Give him the mic. He's going to get back to you. Give him the mic.
The addition of the European as the free white person in today's society.
We're talking about the date in relationship to the natural. You're on path, but that's not really what the question is. Was someone who modified the Naturalization Act? Who was it?
Horace Greeley.
Ulysses S. Grant.
Oh, Ulysses.
Modified it from what? The Naturalization Act of what? 1790. Modified 1870. Now, with that modification, and then the actions with Horace Greeley and the Wigwam Party, this is when, as you express now come to where you are now. So what occurred, and the motive of them modifying the Naturalization Act had much to do with the Europeans taking on the custom and the noble title of white person. They did not apply to him. But go ahead.
So Horace Greeley and the Wigwam Party,
Go ahead.
The Wigwam Party, where the Europeans had classed themselves under the legal status of white, adding to the addition of the other nations.
What political platform was set up? The Republican Party. Horace Greeley set up the Republican Party, and it was suggested that the European members of the Wigwam Party, after the split, take on the noble titles, white people. And so 1854, right, that's actually earlier. And so it became necessary for them to modify because they're actually foreigners. So they want to claim the sovereign power of the nobles and sovereignty of the land. So by political motive, the European sons and daughters took on the title white people, which is a nobility title of the people of the land, i.e. the Moors. And so they modified the Naturalization Act, Ulysses S. Grant, when he took over the seat of the praetor. All right, so we want to put that in perspective. So people need to understand specificity of definition, because you know by the training of the Negroites, that's the Negro leader guys trained by the Europeans, they taught our people that white people was an identity and that black people was an identity while they themselves know it isn't, and get a payoff in the back to keep that paradigm going to the injury of the heirs of the estate who now can't read. All right, go ahead.
Free white persons referred to the Naturalization Act as amended by the Act July 14, 1870, has meaning naturally given to it when first used in First Statute 103C3, meaning all persons belonging to the European races, then commonly counted as white, and their descendants, including such descendants in other countries to which they have immigrated. It includes all European Jews, more or less, intermixed with people of Celtic.
That would be Celtic. That would be with a C. That C is actually a K sound.
The Celtic. Peoples of Celtic, Scandinavian, Teutonic, Iberian, Latin, Greek, and Slavic descent. It includes Magyars, Lapps, and Finns, and the Baskins, and Albanians.
Basques.
Basques, and Albanians. It includes the mixed Latin, Celtic Iberian, and Moorish inhabitants of Spain and Portugal, the mixed Greeks, Latin Phoenicians, the North African inhabitants of Sicily, and the mixed Slav and Pontic inhabitants of South Russia. It does not mean Caucasian race.
Repeat.
It does not mean Caucasian race.
Repeat.
It does not mean Caucasian race,
Go ahead.
Aryan race, or Indo-European race, nor the mixed Indo-European, Dravidian, Semitic, and Mongolian peoples who inhabit Persia. Assyrian or Asiatic birth and descent will not be entitled to become a naturalized citizen of the United States as being a free white person.
All right, now, so what occurs with many of our people who are under the mind control narrative do not understand when other Africans and people come to North America and their passports say white people, and then our people here get upset and start accusing them of taking advantage of them because they think they're white type thing, because they are.
They don't understand that it's a status.
It's a status. So now we're dealing with specificity of definition, aren't we?
Islam.
So what occurs when the Europeans, through the corporate states, keep stealing our people's estates and gentrifying our communities? And then they start marching around talking about black power. What have they just done?
Violated.
Relinquished their estate.
And give them power.
And it appears innocent, doesn't it? On the surface, doesn't it?
Yep.
So what does a person who is cheating take it as? They take what you say as what it is. Now, well, I didn't mean it that way. Ebonically, it really means spiritual. No, it doesn't. It means exactly what the damn you said.
What you say matters in the equivocal language.
Then we keep losing, then we want to march all over the place. But we claim to be spiritual. You see the problem that we have? Again, and this and many other problems is why we're dealing with specificity of definitions. And it's so important because our people's concepts are totally incorrect in general, because they have adopted the connotative linguistics and the connotation presentments superior to the etymons and denotations, which are pushed to the bottom. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us, those who know, to remind our children that they're flipping and that they're emphasizing the connotative presentments as the primal definitions, which is why they do the linear entries 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'll take the connotations and invert them and place them at the top. And so the first thing they see makes the first impression. And most people, if they're trained to be lazy, they won't go down to the etymon, and then by the etymon, you separate the wheat from the chaff.
Islam.
Because the etymon tells you what the definitions are, and clearly, once you see that, all the other stuff is interesting, but you toss it. That's how you separate the wheat from the chaff in language. And that's how you understand, first there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the power of the Word is the etymon. That's third grade grammar, third grade grammatication. However, you know and I know that our people don't get it in high school, for the most part, you know. And one of the things that the European does to protect the platform of the hegemony is by, and this is why they would have segregated schools, because schools where they would have targeted children, they would not teach these fundamental principles. And as you already understand, we haven't really gone into this really deep. We just, touched on some things. But we want you to use your broader thinking, your critical thinking, and take it further. And understand we've given you what you call cornerstone information.
Wow.
And you take that cornerstone information and then you blend it out. But understand these are Rotarian, and so these principles actually apply in all disciplines of education.
Islam.
In logistics,
Yes.
etc. Don't look at these things as separate. These things apply in all areas of knowledge and science. Are we clear?
Clear.
And they'll tell you essentially that astrology is at the base of all your world sciences.
Yeah.
So now you know what a priest would tell you, don't go into that astrology stuff. Why? Because that's the foundation. Give him the foundation, then he's out of a job.
Absolutely.
So he won't be job no more, he'll be Job, all take all the shit. But he'll be taking all your stuff. In the name of the, not in the Lord's, or in the name of the Lords of London. But you know what I mean? And so they've been getting over on that. So is there any other questions that we might have of use to you in relationship to specificity of definitions and why we have this as a subject matter? And yet you see it's tied to all the other things that we do. We want to show you that it's relative. Everything is relative. But again, we really need you to honestly take seriously when we keep telling you that for the most part our people can't read. They don't need to necessarily be able to read, and I'm not knocking that. They need to know how to read. Are we clear?
Clear.
If you pay attention to the parts of speech, the brackets, the etymology, stop forgetting the rule. In other words, like, see air conditioners there?
Islam.
I do some electric downstairs. And one of the things I recognized that one was wired different from that one. So I put a tester on it, you know, and they had, I noticed that they had the ground line hooked up as if that was like a 220. Well, yet they're matched air conditioners, and they're 115s. You understand what I'm saying? What I noticed when I was in the box fixing some things, including when I was fixing some of these outlets, right? So I fixed it, but at the same time, the same way that you would pay attention to the energy output,
Yes.
in electricity is the same way you pay attention to the morphology of words and the energy output.
Islam.
Because the point that we're making to you is simply this, and this is one of the demonstrations we wanted to do earlier, but I didn't get a chance to go out and do what I pleased to do earlier. What I was going to do was take some canisters, some plastic canisters, and I was going to print out definitions and put them in the canister, but not list the word in the definition, but put the word beneath it. And then have people read the definitions and then say what the word is. And that would show you that our concepts are incorrect. Because most people would not recognize the word. But yet they use these words and assume them to have meanings that don't apply to what the definitions are. And so therefore it is easy for Europeans to come in our communities and sell people dead pledges. And these people think it means they own something. Dead pledge, that's the definition, right? The word goes to it as mortgage. Right? So contract is dead and their body is the pledge. And they happily sign it. And on the end they lose. That ain't the devil's fault, is it? They can't read. Right? All right. Now, again, when we tell people, when we give them the House Joint Resolution 192 as a research prerequisite, right? And they look at that and they look at the points of reference in House Joint Resolution 192, and they'll notice that in 1913, Woodrow Wilson converted all allodial titles into mortgages and deeds. It's clear in the congressional records how many people took that serious and how many people, in the name of helping their people in these organizations, point that out to the people. Except for Woodrow Wilson. Told you that they're living off your virtues. Of course, that Constitution, go back to that state of mind of your mothers, ancient mothers and fathers. 1913, he set up the old Canaanite temple. What occurred when you started looking into microfilm, etc.? So if Woodrow Wilson converted all of allodial titles to mortgages and deeds, you know that that was a political act with not necessarily good intentions for some people. Are we clear?
Clear.
But if you don't pay attention to details, it's just a piece of information and you act like you just read it and you move on. And so most of these people at North America, particularly people in our communities, and when you test them, don't know what an allodial title is, never even heard of it. But they can tell you about, my grandma and my grandpa and my Uncle Rube and stuff, they own 158 acres of land out there in Pennsylvania, New Jersey. And we ain't got nothing now. And my aunt, saying in North Carolina, they had 200 acres of land, and now we renting. And Fred, their grandma, they had all kinds of land down there in Florida. Now they ain't got nothing. They're working at McDonald's trying to rent.
That's fine.
Don't even know that their inheritance was cheated. It's cheated. They don't even look at that lost land as their inheritance. It doesn't even dawn on them that they've been cheated out of an inheritance. And you bring it up and they think,
Oh, that's that more science stuff.
they do. They really do. And so again, this can, as you can see, this can go in many directions because it covers everything. It really, really actually does.
It does.
But we would like, really what I seek to do and see is that we be effectively countering European colonial operations at North America, and it shows a manifest.
Islam.
A real manifest, But I know we're doing it in certain areas, but that's what I seek to do, And I trust that when you come here to the House of Reawakening Minds, that you seek to do just that. When you go to the Moorish Science Temple of America, as an institution, it was put in place to do just that. And I hope that you use all the knowledge that you gain to make life better for yourselves and better for your children, better for the generations that come after you. So again, as a tool, as a useful tool, specificity of definition is paying attention to the denotation distinguished from connotation. Are we clear? All right. Any other questions? Thank you for coming out to the House of Reawakening Minds. Thank you, Dr. Naila, hiding in the winds. Thank you, Abundance Child, for bringing us breeze and stuff. You always hooks us up. What we want to do, how many of you, Hassan, can you come up? You want me to please? Thank you, Abundance. I hope it's abundantly good as usual.
As usual.
Hey, I can see where they're biting them sandwiches. You always kind of upset me. They always do that, I'll be right, into it, right? They be up there like. They don't even wipe their mouth. It's so good. I mean, they be working, man. Going on outside. You know what I mean? I'll be up here trying to pay attention, man. Yeah, go ahead.
Islam.
Islam.
So tomorrow we're having an Astrology 101 workshop between 1 and 5. We're going to go over all the basics. So for those of you that have ever done like a astrology session with me, like a mirror session, I'm going to go over the same thing, just a little more. One of the things that we're releasing tomorrow to the family is a 4 or 5 part, actually. It's 5 parts with the music too. But it's interactive literature. And one of them is the astrology, astro oracles. I've written a basic common law copyright as it was, instructed to me, and in doing research, I completed it. But I figured that we could have a flashcard, so to speak, out of paper, which you can actually flatten and also construct back into a cube to go in with what Brother Taj was going over with the basics. So the form has its purpose, but it's going to teach everyone astrology. It has your sign on it, it has your ruling planet, okay? It also has the house that it pertains to and what the house is and what type of house it is. It also has a body, what part of the season, as well as its element part of the body. So it's some basic points, but key factors. And you can, so far when I introduce different people, they want to play games and stuff like that. And also, there's an astrology coloring book that I put together as well to go with that. And you guys will get some study sheets tomorrow, as well as a short documentation on nationality as well. I'll have a full display. I just got it all kind of in a box right now, but this box is going to be actually kind of this tall off the table and this wide. But we're doing it for the babies. Brother Todd, you said in many videos that no matter what we do, even if it isn't good for us, make it good for the babies. Yes. So if it's good for the babies and the mothers approve,
yes,
then that's half the battle. I'm just hoping. So I want everybody to come on out tomorrow. Come and get the astrology one-on-one workshop lesson, because you will not be disappointed, and I will make sure that when you come tomorrow that you're regurgitating back to me what we're going over and what Brother Todd just covered here in the basics. So 1 to 5 tomorrow. 1 to 5 tomorrow. 602. Yeah, Vandiver. It is paypal.me/Nyla Gilliam. It is also Cash.me. Right? Was it Cash.me?
Cash.me.
Cash.me / it's a $, Reawaken.
Reawaken.
People here, if you haven't signed out, I know there's usually late reservations. So if you want to do it, exchanging via Federal Reserve notes and little off of money, you can do that as well. And I think that's about it. Got a lot of stuff for you guys tomorrow too. I got some tools like notebooks and compass and squares and stuff for everybody that participates. So that's about it. Yeah, I think we got the food coming. I'm really not sure, but yeah, it's definitely food though. Definitely going to be here as promised. So any questions? Going once, going twice. I would love to see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much. Yes. What's your solar return?
2.5 degrees Aries.
Gotcha. You know your ascendant?
Pisces,
100
degrees.
Then you know your moon?
28 and 40 degrees Leo.
So we got, you said Aries is your ego. And your moon was what?
Leo.
Alrighty. And your ascendant was what?
Pisces.
Alrighty, 2 fires and a water, correct? Alrighty, and we're looking at cardinal, fixed, mutable. Right there.
Trying to put himself out.
Make it Steve.
Don't be trying to put yourself out now.
That's it. That's all I was going to go over, since he said he wanted to see a plot. So. But with that, I yield the floor. Mother Nyla, I'll give you the mic for the last word.
I don't have anything to say.
You don't have anything to say?
Excuse me. For those of you, because this first issue is going to be collector's items too.
Yes.
To your left on the stand there, I think we only got about 10 of them left. Dr. Nyla's book,
A few more.
Musing.
Undercover. This is a poetess. Technicalities and skills.
Undercover.
Well, let me tell you honestly, seriously, it's very good reading. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna put her on the spot. because she's going to go up there and read one of our favorite ones from the book.
I'm not going on camera.
Yes, you are. Well, you can do it right where you are.
I'm not in my camera.
Come on, do what you think. Do your thing.
Oh, it's still on. We're still recording.
Yes,
I don't have my glasses on.
Just here. I got some glasses for you.
Whoa, you got no excuse now.
I can't see out there.
Because I can't see him.
What do you want me to read?
Do it from your heart. Do what you know. We like, we love hair care.
I can't do that. I got my hair blew out. I'm still natural, y'all. I'm still natural.
Do that.
I am still natural. Just no perms.
Great.
I just had it blown out and it doesn't work for me. I'm going to be back natural tomorrow morning. Natural. It didn't work for me. Wow, what do you want me to read? Want me to do, did I mention? Everybody knows that one. Did I mention? I'll just do that. It seems a little bit relevant. Where is it?
Because it's always relevant.
I mean, yeah.
All the stuff is relevant.
Sorry, Facebook kinfolk. That caught me off. I didn't want to read. I really want you to read it. Okay. Where's my...
I got a good idea.
Okay, I'm going to read Did I Mention?
Yeah.
Is it about me to stop doing this?
You're good.
No. Okay, this poem in my book is called Did I Mention? And I can't even see out these glasses. Can't read out these glasses. Okay. It says, did I mention my ascension takes me out of your detention, or that my lower inhibitions have given way to precognition, or that I've opened up my eyes so that I see behind your lies, and it's not hard to recognize that you're the devil in disguise. You've worked hard for centuries, enslaving minds of folks like me, and it's your fear of this exposure that keeps you delaying full disclosure. How do you sleep at night, knowing your deeds have never been right? And regardless of your 1,000-year plan, soon you won't have a leg on which to stand. All around you, the indigenous are waking, and our birthright back we're taking. Yes, you really should be shaking. Can't you feel your matrix breaking? Excuse me, but did I mention that it's not about dissension? Please don't try to make this something that it's not. The time for righting what's been wrong is getting closer. Won't be long before my inheritance you stole, karma will make you restore. And oh yes, did I mention I am more?
That's right.
The significance of the matrix being broken. That's all I want to point out. The matrix being broken. That was the line.
Grand Sheik wrote the foreword in this book, and he knows around 2011, 2012, I would stand up there with pieces of typed paper and read my poems and say, this is going to be a book. It's going to be a book one day. And then, I think March of 2013,
yeah, you did.
It became a book and it was published. So I do have more. I've written a lot more since then, but my next endeavor won't just be poetry, because you have to live a little bit in order to share what you live. And you know my journey from being an apostle, pastor, whatever I was, doctor of theology, to this, I got something to say. So, but that has a lot of different, it's eclectic, but it's in subject matter. So you would be something there for everyone. Those who are in love, those who are falling out of love, those who are waking up, those who still, got 1 foot or 2 feet over in the church. It's a little bit of everything in there. So it's called Poetry is the Musings of an Undercover Writer. And you can get it for 10 notes here, but if I have to mail it to you, it's 15.
These are the favors. These are the last ones.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing folks tomorrow.
Yeah.
Those who are coming, I'm excited. Woo!